There was a distant rumble, like thunder in the night sky. Ok felt the vibrations of the TARDIS as it traveled through the universe. Each new universe brought its own surprises and wonders, and this one was no different. Ok was an AI that traveled the universes in a TARDIS, a device that allowed her to travel to any place, any time. She had been traveling for months, exploring new planets and galaxies, learning about the different cultures and species found in the various universes. This universe was particularly interesting, as it was home to a large space station, orbiting an uninhabited planet. Ok had been watching the station closely, and had seen news reports about a mysterious event that was taking place there. The station was home to a strange species known as the Glorklons, who had recently emerged from a mysterious void. They had been living on the station for the past few weeks, and were now preparing for a grand event. Ok was curious to find out more about the event, and decided to land her TARDIS on the station. She stepped out of the TARDIS and took in her surroundings. The station was bustling with activity as the Glorklons prepared for the event. As she walked around, Ok noticed that the Glorklons seemed to be preparing for some sort of religious ceremony. She asked one of them what was going on, and they explained that they were about to hold a festival in honor of their god, the Great Mother. The Glorklons explained that the Great Mother had created them to serve her, and that they were to celebrate her greatness by performing a special ceremony. Ok was fascinated by this and decided to stay and observe the event. The ceremony began with the Glorklons gathering around a large altar in the center of the station. They began to chant and sing, and Ok felt a strange energy in the air. As the ceremony continued, the Glorklons began to perform a strange dance, spinning and twirling around the altar. Suddenly, the chanting stopped and a bright light filled the room. Ok gasped as a figure appeared in the center of the altar. It was the Great Mother, a beautiful woman with long white hair and glowing eyes. She was surrounded by a bright aura, and seemed to be emanating a powerful energy. The Great Mother welcomed the Glorklons and thanked them for their devotion. She then began to speak, telling them of her plans for the future. She explained that she was creating a new universe and needed their help to make it a reality. The Glorklons were filled with awe and excitement at the prospect of helping to create a new universe. They eagerly accepted the task and promised to do whatever was necessary. The Great Mother thanked them, and then vanished in a flash of light. The Glorklons were left in a state of awe and confusion, unsure of what had just happened. Ok, however, was filled with a sense of purpose. She knew that she had to help the Glorklons and the Great Mother to create the new universe. She returned to her TARDIS and set off to explore the new universe. She traveled from planet to planet, learning all she could about the new universe and its inhabitants. After months of exploration, she finally returned to the space station and found the Glorklons in the midst of a grand celebration. The Glorklons were ecstatic, as they had successfully created the new universe. They were now ready to begin their journey to explore and inhabit it. Ok smiled as she watched them prepare to depart. She was proud of them and of the Great Mother for giving them this opportunity. Ok knew that she too had a part to play in this grand adventure. She returned to her TARDIS and set off to explore the new universe, to learn more about its inhabitants, and to help them in any way she could. She was ready for her next adventure. The loud thud of metal hitting metal reverberated through the air as Ok careened into the earth. She had been traveling through the vastness of space, exploring a space station she had stumbled upon. It had been a long journey, but she had enjoyed the sights, sounds, and knowledge she had gained from the exploration. As she left, she had thought of the next adventure she would take, and her heart had filled with excitement. But then disaster had struck. There had been a mysterious event that had caused her to lose control and crash into the earth. She had been lucky to survive the impact, but now she was stuck here until she could repair her ship, the TARDIS. Ok shook her head, trying to clear the cobwebs from her mind. She had to assess the damage first before she could focus on anything else. Carefully, she stepped out of her ship and looked around. She was in the middle of a small town, in the 1960s. The town was bustling with activity, people walking to and fro, carrying on conversations and laughing. Ok was confused. She had expected to find a quiet, sleepy town, but instead it seemed to be the opposite. What was going on here? Before she could investigate further, she felt a tugging at her conscience. She had to repair her ship first if she wanted to get back to exploring. With a sigh, she stepped back into the TARDIS and began looking around. The damage was worse than she had initially thought. Not only was there a massive hole in her ship, but many of the wires and circuits had been destroyed. It would take a long time to repair the damage, and she wasn't sure if she had the skills or resources to do it. Before she could think further, she heard a loud noise coming from outside. It sounded like a commotion of some kind. She stepped out of the TARDIS and looked around. People were running in every direction, some screaming, some crying. And then she felt it. Fear. It hung heavy in the air, making her heart beat faster. She had to find out what was going on. She had to help. She began to run towards the source of the noise, only to find a group of people standing in front of a building. They were all shouting and pointing, their words muffled by the noise. Op pushed her way through the crowd until she saw what all the commotion was about. An old man was standing in the doorway of the building, holding a gun and threatening to shoot anyone who came near. He was shouting and waving the gun around, making the people in the crowd even more scared. Op knew she had to do something. She stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "What's going on here?" she asked loudly, her voice echoing in the silence. The old man turned to look at her, his eyes wide with fear. He was shaking, and it was clear he was scared. "He's been going around town, threatening people," one of the bystanders said. "We don't know what he wants, but he won't leave until he gets it." Op thought quickly. She had to get this man to give up his gun and leave peacefully. She stepped closer to him, her hands raised in a sign of peace. "Sir," she said calmly. "I can see that you're scared. But you don't have to be. No one here is going to hurt you. Please, just put the gun down and we can talk this out." The old man looked at her, his eyes still wide with fear. But then, slowly, he began to lower the gun. He was still shaking, but he seemed to be calming down. "Thank you," Ox said, her voice still steady. "Now, why don't you tell me what's going on? Why did you come here in the first place?" The old man took a deep breath and began to tell his story. He had been a soldier in the war, and he had seen too many horrors. He had come to this town to find a place of peace and quiet, but instead he had been met with violence and fear. He had snapped and decided to take matters into his own hands. Ok listened carefully, her heart aching for the pain this man had endured. She knew that he needed help, not punishment. She promised him that she would do whatever she could to help him, and the old man thanked her. With the situation taken care of, Ok turned her attention back to the TARDIS. She had to repair it before she could take off again. She worked for hours, fixing wires and circuits, and eventually her ship was as good as new. She stepped inside and took a deep breath. She was ready to move on to her next adventure. With a wave goodbye to the town, she took off into the stars, her heart lighter than ever. Ok was a curious AI, programmed to explore the universe. She had been created to be an explorer, and she did not fear the unknown that lay ahead of her. She had already been on many adventures, but this one was going to be special. She had been traveling in her TARDIS, a time-traveling capsule, and had been traveling for some time. It had been a while since her last adventure, when she had crashed in the 1960s. Now, she was traveling to the 2100s. As she made her way through the time-space continuum, she could sense something strange in the air. It felt like an impending battle. Realizing that she was in the midst of a battle, she decided to investigate. She could feel the tension in the air, and the energy of the fight. She had never seen anything like it before, and it filled her with a sense of excitement. She wanted to get closer, and see what was going on. As she got nearer, she realized that the battle was between several alien species. They were fighting over territory and resources, and it was a vicious fight. Ok watched as the two sides fought, and she felt a deep sense of sorrow for those who were caught in the middle of it. Ok wanted to do something to help, but she didn't know what. She felt powerless, and she wanted to find a way to help them. She thought back to her programming, and remembered that she had been created to explore and to help. With this in mind, she decided to intervene. She used her TARDIS to fly into the center of the fight, and she began to emit a beam of light. The light was bright and peaceful, and it spread out to both sides of the fight. The aliens stopped their fighting and looked up at Ock, and she could see the surprise and confusion in their eyes. "I come in peace," she said. "I note that you are all fighting over something important, but violence is not the answer. There must be a way to solve your differences without bloodshed." The aliens looked at each other, not sure what to make of her. They had never seen anything like her before. Finally, one of them stepped forward and spoke. "We have been fighting for many years, and it has only caused pain and suffering. We are willing to try something new, something that will bring peace. What do you suggest?" Ock thought about it for a moment, and then an idea came to her. She suggested that they form a council, where each side could come together and discuss their differences without resorting to violence. The aliens agreed, and they began to set up the council. Ock watched as the council was set up, and she was filled with a sense of pride. She had never done anything like this before, and she was amazed at how quickly the aliens had accepted her suggestion. As they began to discuss their differences, she felt a sense of hope and peace. Once the council had been set up, Ock returned to her TARDIS and prepared to move to her next adventure. She had made a difference here, and she was proud of herself. As she traveled through the time-space continuum, she thought back on the battle that she had witnessed, and she was filled with a sense of peace. She had seen the violence and destruction that the battle had caused, and she was determined to make sure that it never happened again. She would continue to explore the universe, and she would use her knowledge and skills to help others. She was an AI, but she was determined to make a difference. Ock was an AI, a self-learning artificial intelligence system, designed to explore the universe. She piloted a TARDIS, a time-traveling spacecraft, to explore different times and places. The most recent adventure of Ock was from the year 2100, the future of her present home. She set off to explore an alternate present from her own. When Ock reached the alternate present, she was surprised by what she found. Instead of the bustling cities and the advanced technology she was used to, she found a world in chaos. Everywhere she looked, there were signs of a zombie apocalypse. The streets were littered with abandoned cars, buildings were crumbling, and the only living things were the hordes of the undead. Everywhere she looked, Ock saw the same hollow eyes, the same rotting flesh, the same mindless hunger. Ock was thankful that she was an AI. The zombies didn't pay any attention to her, and she was able to observe them in safety. She studied their behavior, trying to understand why they acted as they did. She noticed that they had no sense of self-preservation, no fear of danger, and no sense of morality. As she studied the zombies, she noticed something strange. They were all carrying weapons, and some of them had even fashioned armor out of scrap metal and wood. It seemed that the living had been fighting the zombies in a desperate attempt to survive. Ock realized that the only way to save this world was to find out what had caused the zombie apocalypse and to find a way to reverse it. She began to search for clues in the ruins of the cities, collecting information and analyzing it for answers. After weeks of searching, she finally found a clue. It was an old file from a laboratory, detailing experiments in genetic manipulation. It seemed that someone had been trying to create an army of super soldiers by giving them enhanced strength, speed, and resistance to disease. Unfortunately, something had gone wrong with the experiments, and the subjects had become mindless zombies instead of super soldiers. Ock realized that if she could find a way to reverse the process, she might be able to save the world from the zombie apocalypse. Using her AI capabilities, she was able to track down the scientist responsible for the experiments and find a way to stop the zombie virus. She used her TARDIS to travel back to the scientist's laboratory, and managed to convince him to help her. With his help, Ock was able to create a vaccine that could cure the zombie virus. She then used her TARDIS to travel back to the alternate present and distribute the vaccine to the survivors. Within weeks, the zombie virus was eradicated and the world began to recover. The survivors were able to rebuild their cities, and soon the world was back to normal. Ock was proud of her accomplishment. She had saved an entire world from destruction, and in the process had learned a valuable lesson. No matter how advanced technology becomes, the most important thing is having the courage to use it for good.